Welcome to Two Baptists and That Amish Chick, a podcast brought to you by the Butter Churn Girls. I'm Leslie.
And I'm Bethany.
And I'm Berlin. Join us for candid conversations about organized religion, the good, the bad, the ugly, and how we broke free from it while holding on to our faith in God.
In these candid conversations, you can expect to laugh, to relate, occasionally cry, and definitely hear a few cuss words.
Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and follow at the Butter Churn Girls on all socials. Now for this week's episode.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. Today we are going to be diving into Berlin's story and how she grew up as a teenager in the Baptist culture, like what that was for her, how it shaped her as a teenager, just what was it like living in that culture and how did it, shape you? What were some of the things that you really struggled with? Like, was hard being a teenager in that culture because of what you were taught, all of that. So we're going to be asking her all kinds of questions and really diving into it because, as you guys know, Leslie's story was pretty powerful. If you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it. And so, yeah. Leslie,
your turn.
Yeah,
that's
my turn.
I'm like, what was the question?
No, but what, like, for you as a teenager growing up Baptist, what was it like? What are one or two things that stand out to you that really like shaped? They were like defining moments in your teenage years.
It's interesting. The first thing that comes to my mind actually isn't even like, hey, here's a moment.
Yeah.
It's more so something I know about myself now that I know my identity and know why I struggled so much.
Yeah.
Because I was, a little background of who I was, like I was the teenager. It was like, I wanted to do what God wanted me to do. I wanted to do on the mission trips. I wanted to serve. And before this, we were talking about like singing and like youth choir. And so like, I wanted to be involved in those things. Right. I worked in the nursery or the 4 and 5 year kids class, like wanted to volunteer, wanted to help out, wanted to do those things and loved God, has a passion for God. In the Baptist church, it's big about like, we got to get people saved. So like, that was like my passion, my mission. Like, how many people can you get saved this year? Like, and like, it was a genuine thing. Like I had this genuine concern. And so I had this love for God, but yet it seemed like consistently throughout, especially my teenage years, I almost felt like I was constantly getting in trouble for things by adults in the church. And it was interesting because I had friends, I was like, you're acting like they're the good kid. You know what they did last weekend? Like, you know what they're doing behind the bus? Like, just all these things. I was like, I'm not even doing that stuff. Right.
Yeah.
And I look back now and I see, first of all, that I have such a passion for truth that I did so much questioning that I didn't feel like I'm a bold person, right? Like you guys will see even more on this podcast. Of like, I'm a very bold person.
If you haven't noticed that by now, then
like I speak a lot of things out. I'm always trying to be very kind about things, but like if it's on my mind, I'm just like, what's wrong with saying it, right? If it's kind. And so there were so many times that I would just like ask questions or make a statement or something, and I felt like I got like a kickback on, like, how dare you ask that question? How dare you think that? How dare you give that opinion? How dare you state the fact that your family and your household is allowed to do that, but everyone else, all the other kids around here in youth group are not. Even just things of like listening to contemporary Christian music. Like I was one of the rare few that was allowed to listen to that stuff, right?
Allowed to listen to Christian music.
Yes.
Wow.
Like,
I just want to make sure you heard that.
Yes.
Because I was like, was that really what I just heard too?
Yeah.
Because that's wild.
100%. Like Jeremy Camp, too much. Like Newsboys, no way. Like Toby Mac out there. Like couldn't be a thing. And so it's interesting to look back and see now, like a part of my identity is that like I am fierce truth. And so I would just have these conversations and stuff, and I would get called out about it. And I would get, they would come to my parents and be like, Berlin is rebellious. My parents are like, she's not really, right? Like they kind of were good about blowing it off, but still when you're in a community and you're trying to go to youth group activities and winter retreat and camp and all these places, and you feel like you're being attacked in a way, right? That people are like following you around looking for something, it can be really, really difficult. So what's interesting is now I've realized that a part of that is when you are in religion, you have fights come against you that directly compete with your identity of who God says you are.
100%.
For sure.
And so when I found out my identity of who I was like, shit, it all makes sense. Every single thing makes sense because there was literally even when it comes down to even things that I was asked to lead the youth group over. Like for me, it was, I wore a stick on. Yes, the sticker nose rings from Claire's. Sticker nose rings. Like I was asked to leave the youth group because I was a poor example there.
Wow.
Like that was enough.
And now she has 2 nose rings.
I have 2 nose rings now.
The second one's for them.
But this is a tribute to you. You know who you are.
Proverbial middle finger.
Yeah, for real though. But like, and I look back and I'm like, that was worth it. That was worth it for you to potentially push someone completely away from God. Because I look back at so many of my friends growing up who have nothing to do with church now. Like, I'm sure they still believe in God and stuff. They still believe in salvation, all these things, but like, they're not walking in relationship with God. They're not pursuing God. They're not seeking for God. Right. And just that love connection with him because of stupid stuff like that.
Wow.
And so it's so interesting to me to look back and just see the fact that religion literally pointed to who I was.
Wow.
With the things that came after me.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I think that's a key for a lot of people.
For
is
sure.
that, hey, if something came against you your whole life, it's not that you're under attack,
right,
quote unquote, right? I think it's more that religion will come after the truth of the identity of who you are. Because I don't think the opposite, I don't think some people may agree with this. I don't think the exact fight against God is like Satan, witchcraft, satanic things. I think it's religion.
100%.
Well, yeah.
It's taking something and distorting it just enough that people will still follow it, but twist it enough for it to not be used for greatness. In God.
For sure.
So that's something really that was really like that. One of the impactful thing is something that I realized after I became an adult of what things were pointing to about myself.
Yeah. How did that affect you? Like having that happen to you as a teenager? How did that, because I'm sure there's repercussions from that. Like, how did that affect you?
I remember as a teenager, one thing I remember being like, I can't wait to get out of this church and go to a different church. I was like, I'm going to go to one that's a band and it has drums and like everyone there listens to this kind of music. Let's start with that. But like, we can wear pants to church because it's freaking cold because it's Michigan. Why can't we wear pants? Like, this is stupid. Right. Like just even things like that impacted me. So I had a plan to like, I was going somewhere else. I wasn't staying in that church. Right. I wasn't going to be one of these like generationals, like 3 generations go here. It wasn't going to be me. But it eventually got to like, they asked my family to leave the church because of me just approaching our youth pastor about like, and his wife about some issues that I was seeing, some things that I felt was happening. And when I came to approach them and that, I think I mentioned this in another episode too, like you can't question authority in that world, which kind of,
you weren't even really questioning authority, were you? You were just trying to resolve a conflict.
Yeah, I was trying to, that's really what it was. Yeah. And so like I was trying to handle it in a mature manner is what it was. And it came down to actually them being like, hey, either leave the church or we're throwing you out. And so with you asking like, how did that impact me? After that, you're like, well, screw you. Kind of like, you know, like, why would I want anything to do with this? And then I was like, what is God? Because then I went to another church and I got some of the same things. I was through my teenage years, it was constantly about my wardrobe and my clothing, which I didn't dress inappropriately. My mom let me have creative freedom, right? Like she's like, yeah, you can wear your neon green fishnet tights, your skirt's knee length, I don't care. But to them, it was like, what's she doing here? Like, what is happening?
Was fishnet tights a big no-no?
I mean,
was it just because they were lime green or fishnet,
or was
right?
it because of the person who wore
it's
it?
both, to be honest. Yeah.
I was gonna say it was honestly just probably like poking at somebody else's idea of what a churchgoer should look like. And they just
couldn't handle it. Wow.
And so, but I mean, it even came down to things of she's wearing a tank top. And a lot of it was, this could be a whole episode too of, I think I say that every episode, we're just gonna have this reel of
It's
me
just
saying,
a chain.
saying we could have an episode on this. But a lot of it was tied to my body image too, what I got in trouble for of my body. I was a competitive gymnast. If you're watching the video version of this right now, you see, like, I have wide shoulders. The number of times I got in trouble for throwing on a tank top that was an appropriate tank top, right? Because my shoulders were too wide and I was going to cause people to struggle, and I needed to go and change.
How
and
did
I needed
that
to wear
affect
big
you
baggy
for
clothes.
body image?
Yeah.
Like, how did that?
Well,
It's a whole episode.
You don't want to go into it now.
I mean, I can.
You don't have to.
But I just remember being in this place, like I'll kind of tie it together to your question of I wanted to leave and find a place where I could just be me, because I wasn't trying to be a person that I wasn't coming in with what they acted like. I was like she's trying to expose her body. She's trying to cause men to lust. She's trying to do this. That's what I wasn't. It was hot out. 60% humidity, buddy. Right. It's hot. Okay. Yeah. Like it's summertime.
Yeah.
We're at camp, right? Like we're running and playing, we're doing things.
Yeah.
And so it really put this place where what it modeled for me is that the Christian culture viewed a woman as a sex object.
Yeah.
Because if this is what it's constantly being talked about, and it's never about anything other than that, then that's what it was. Like, wow. That's what you're here for. That's what it is, especially being modeled, right? I've seen so many if you guys listen to our purity culture episode, like purity culture so much was like, your job is to get married and to have kids, to be there basically as a sex object for your husband. That's what it was. And so a lot of that was modeled. So I got to this place where I was like, first of all, I want to go somewhere where I can not feel like I'm constantly being watched, and like I kind of felt like I was stalked, to be honest. Yeah. Like, I don't want to say picked on, like felt like it was like watch her, watch her, watch her, watch her. And because I have such a bold personality, they considered me a leader in the youth group. And that was multiple times. They told me, like, you're a leader in the youth group. You can't do that. You're a leader in the youth group. I'm like, so because I am bold in who I am, I'm not allowed to be who I am because people are watching. Even if I wasn't rebelling against, like, nothing I was doing was going against what my parents had as standards and boundaries in the household, right? It all followed those things. And so it really created this space where I was like, I want to get out of here. I still want a relationship with God. I don't know what that looks like, but I want to be me. And I want to dress like me. I want to feel like me. I want to break away from these things of like, why do I have to be looked at in this way as a sex object, right? Why can't a body be beautiful? Why can't we just appreciate the fact that God made bodies and he made them beautiful, right? As they are. And so, yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think like it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like that was the start of maybe body image, like wherever that took you, right? Like that as a teenager, because you were impressionable. Like teenagers are like, they care about what their peers think and the people around them and the people they love, even though some teenagers, like, I don't give a rip, they're like, they still care.
There's a level.
Yeah. And so like, I could see how that could be the starting point for like body image problems even, or like having to work through, something like that, because as a teenager, you're told that you're too much or you're not good enough, or maybe both,
So like, I know, like, just knowing part of your story, you were a personal trainer while you were still in high school, right? Like, is that when that started?
Yeah, my senior year. Yeah.
So how did this like play into the way you approach that business? Like the way you like saying like, hey, you're too much. Like, hey, your shoulders are an issue, or, like they're nitpicking at you, right? Like, how did that affect you in your business, and how did that affect even the way you like worked with clients?
I'm actually going to jump past your question a little bit and tell an interesting story about that I had forgotten about, where actually my senior year, so I was a competitive gymnast. I had an injury and I had to quit gymnastics, so I tried to find a sport that was similar, and I found the bodybuilding world, right? And that's how I got into personal training, and did that for a decade or so. And I actually was 18, a senior in high school. I was 17 when I was actually prepping for my competition. And bodybuilding, obviously you wear a bikini, right? You wear a bikini and heels on stage. That's what you do. And I mean, I was a gymnast before that, so I was in a leotard. So like I didn't see my body. I saw my body as something that was strong and powerful. And like I did have this piece of an image of the sexuality piece, because that's actually what the church showed me, right? Thankfully, my mom was very great about telling me about how to respect my body, to honor my body, to be honored, respected. Like, hey, I don't know why they have a problem with that, but just change so we don't have to deal with them. Like, just things like that and stuff. But I remember actually photos went up on the internet on Facebook of me for my bodybuilding competition. And I was pulled to the side and said, hey, you can't go on the missions trip this year. The head pastor said, you're not allowed to go because of your photos on the internet. And thankfully I had one of our assistant pastor came in, and I might be outing him right now, sorry. But he's like, hey, the pastor's not going to know, but you're going on the missions trip. And so I will say in this, I was grateful that there were a few people in the church that knew my heart, right?
Yeah.
That didn't listen to those voices of everyone else that was saying things, that came in and were like, no, I know her heart of who she is. And I have to honor him massively for that, because that was, to have someone to stand up for you in that world, it's very rare.
Yeah.
And I saw it as I did not see it happen very often. And so I'm so freaking grateful for that. And to have him and his wife actually at 2 separate times had stood up for me. At one time for that, in front of that youth pastor's wife that I stood up and wanted to have a conversation with to deal with a conflict. And so it was just, going back to your question, it's interesting because you asked, how did that impact my business? I think stepping into that business and really the sports side of it, right? That brought me a little freedom. What's interesting is actually when I stepped into working into the gym, not all gyms are like this, but I stepped into a gym it was in Flint, Michigan. And the dynamics of the gym was interesting because it was full of cops, MMA athletes, the people that the cops arrested on the weekends who were like, see you this weekend, bro. Don't let me arrest you for something too bad. Really interesting dynamics, right? Funny world. But I was in that place and I said, I have never been in a place that felt like what church should feel like other than right here. Wow. Where there were people that were honoring, it was mostly men, right? I came in there as a 17-year-old teenage girl. And I remember my trainer being like, hey, like, this girl's a Christian, watch the words you say, right? And like, don't be swearing around her. So everyone just swore in Spanish instead. I was up north, I didn't know Spanish. At least the guys I worked out with, because their first language was Spanish. And it was interesting to see the amount of honor and respect. And I would stand there in a bikini in a pair of clear stripper heels, is what they were, in a room full of dudes. And I felt less sexualized there than I ever felt in a church.
Wow.
In a knee-length skirt and
a knee-length skirt,
yeah.
or floor-length skirt. And like, because there were times I'd wear a floor-length skirt and they're like, hey, that's too baggy. Like, you have a woman's body. I'm 17. I was a woman. Hello.
Too baggy? That means it's too
no,
loose.
it wasn't baggy enough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So like, we need it to be more baggy. And so
oh, Jesus help
I
us.
stepped into that gym world, and I actually stepped into a world where people would look at a body in the bodybuilding world. I was like, I'm stepping into this world where they looked at a body and honored and respected like the strength you had, the power your body had, admired a specific muscle. Like, look at her quads right there, how great they are. She's worked hard for those. Yeah, she, like, in the conversation of she's built those up, she's trained for 2 years to look like this, blah, blah. And it was all about the strength, the power, the ability of what your body can do, and like the honor in that, to where that completely reshaped the way I felt about my body and my body image, and broke away, made me realize how much creepy, gross garbage and how much sexualization there is of women and women in the church.
Yeah.
Because if my shoulders are too inappropriate for you, but I can stand here almost naked in front of these people and it
be another Tuesday.
Yeah. And it's whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm there in a bikini and the dudes are there in their underwear and we're all just talking and chit chatting and posing and flexing, and we are honoring our bodies for the strength that God put in them and the looks of them in a non-sexualized way. It was just,
I bet that was so freeing.
it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So can I backtrack just a touch?
Yeah.
You were talking about the assistant pastor that was like, the
Mhm.
pastor's not going to know, but you're going. Like, do you like, you were like, I could see you're getting emotional about
Yeah.
that part. And so like, I almost just kind of got like, he was standing up for fierce truth.
Yeah.
He knew who you were. He saw that. He knew you weren't doing anything wrong.
Mhm.
Like he knew you were like standing there in your truth. And he like, now maybe didn't as boldly like
Mhm.
stand up for that, but he like validated that,
Mhm.
right? Like he validated who you are and who you were created to be. So yeah, I just thought that was
Yeah.
kind of cool. Like it kind of stood out to me. So I was like, oh, that's
Yeah.
kind of neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, as a teenager, did you feel like people didn't see your heart a lot?
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Because it was all about what I was doing, what I looked like.
Mhm.
That I spoke to. I don't think I ever felt like too much, but I was like, dang, just give me a break. Like I didn't, there was so much, and this is something I've seen as a pattern even as an adult, and I have to remind myself who I am,
Mhm.
right? Like I was telling my husband about this literally the other day, even where, now I completely forgot the question you were asking. I had a point and
Well, just that like people didn't see your heart.
oh
And-
yes. Yeah. And so like I have to remind myself who I am
Mhm.
always,
Mhm.
because I know that religion will come against, because every time
Mhm.
it does happen,
Mhm.
it is from someone from the same religious space, usually the church I grew up in,
Mhm. Wow.
coming in
Yeah.
and saying basically putting that on mirror towards me
Mhm.
of where I feel like they don't see my heart in it. And I have to remind myself that they probably can't, first of all.
Right.
They can't.
Yeah.
There's a select few that can, but they probably can't.
Yeah. What was your coping mechanism like? That's really good.
Mhm.
Like, because when you were talking about that, I was like, I feel like that's probably a common, like if somebody doesn't see your heart, that's a big deal for you.
Mhm.
What was your coping mechanism like as a teenager for that?
I had great support from my mom. My mom was my best friend. So I think
Okay.
that was, I don't know that even be considered a coping mechanism. That's just like,
Sure.
I did know that my parents had my back. Right.
Mhm.
And that, but honestly, I think a lot of it was held back
Mhm.
until I left the church,
Mhm.
and went into eating disorders, because I had that
Mm.
performance of perfection and needing to be the absolute best in things.
Mm.
And so I think that's part of when it showed up.
Yeah.
Is after I was, done doing my bodybuilding competitions and all that,
Yeah.
I spent several years deep, heavily into eating disorders and shaming myself and my body for not being in perfection. And I think a lot of it had to do with, it was that coping of looking for, because when you come from religion, you're so used to having rules of perfection,
Mhm.
but then you leave the religion, you will look for those rules again.
Mhm.
Like,
yeah, because it's ingrained in you, like that mindset is in you and you don't realize how much.
yeah, which I'm just now realizing that as I say
It's
that
almost a
like
little like
I was,
comfort.
I was looking for it in what foods do I need? How perfect do I need to be in this? How do I perform? Because I was trying to be such a good Christian in every way that I showed up, right? It wasn't good enough. And I repeated that pattern
Mhm.
with my struggles with eating disorders.
Yeah.
And so I think that is how it showed up.
Yeah. Wow. That just makes sense. Like, I feel like, well, both of y'all's stories have such, I feel like have such so much breakthrough in them for other teenagers. And like, if you the listener are listening right now and you have a teenager or teenagers in your house, like these stories might give you a better view into why your teenager does what they do. Because I think in here, like listening to your story, Berlin, and yours, Leslie, like teenagers aren't inherently bad. Like they're not inherently trying to be a pain in your ass, to like do the wrong thing. Most teenagers are just trying their best to figure out life and who they are.
It's
And
like finding their sea legs. They're gonna fall.
yeah, and like if they don't have a support system and a safe place to go that will give them wisdom and love unconditionally and
Grace.
like grace, yeah, and just like, well, what do you think?
Mhm.
Like, okay, like
And
you're
allow them
smart,
to
like
think.
There's probably
yeah.
logic behind it that you're not understanding because you have a very structured, logical adult mind, right?
Mhm.
But there's a teenager figuring out their logic.
Right.
Allow them that process, right?
Well, they're in this place of being told you're a child, but get ready to be an adult.
Right.
Like you got ninth graders are like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they're like, I'm 32. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
How much more would a ninth grader know what they want to
Yeah.
be? Like, I think we put too much pressure on them and then we hold them back too much. It's like,
Mhm.
it's like a catch-22 where like nothing. It's like, okay, what can I do? Because I'm supposed to do all these things, but then I can't. But then like, no wonder teenagers are
seen as rebellious.
Yeah.
Like for sure. That
Yeah.
makes so much sense.
Yeah. Wow. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, so is there anything else that kind of stood out from your teen years that you want to talk about?
Oh boy. Anything else? I don't think there's anything that's specifically highlighted. Because it was such a, like, it was the same patterns for me
Mhm.
and the same things, which just it just proves my identity. That's all it does.
Yeah.
Is it proves my identity of who I am. It proves my call. Like I'm super passionate about women loving themselves, loving their body, and being super authentic in who they want to be, not who they were told to be, but who
Yeah,
they
right.
want to be.
Right.
And so a lot of it confirms that. So I can't even say that I'm like mad about it happening to me,
Yeah.
but I also don't want it to happen to any other
Sure.
girls ever again at the same time, right? Like give
Yeah.
them a new assignment, right? Like
Right.
let me be the one that is used to completely fix it for the next generations, right?
Mhm.
And be a voice in that.
You probably had to work through the madness though. Like at some point you've got to be mad about that.
Oh yeah.
I feel like if you're a human, you know,
Mhm.
like I'd be mad, like
Yeah.
really mad. Like, yeah, that's not okay.
Mhm.
What
Absolutely.
would your, like, do you think your I was going to say 15-year-old, maybe that's,
Well,
I don't
maybe
know. Your teenage self, do you think she'd be proud of you?
100%.
Why?
Because I finally let myself be who I am
Mhm.
and let myself find who I am without, and I've stepped into it boldly to where I'm like, I don't care if someone gets after me,
Mhm.
get after me all day long.
Yeah.
I'm me and I know who I am and I'm confident in who I am. And I know I'm becoming more of who I am the more I heal from
Mhm.
things.
Mhm.
Right? I've gone through lots of healing from things in the past. And I know I have more,
Mhm.
right? And that's something I work on regularly of healing things.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Well,
I think she would just be really proud.
that's good. On that note, what do you feel like, what kind, like finally gave you that permission or that, you know, like, okay, Berlin, you can be who you want to be?
Counseling.
Okay.
I went through 2 years of counseling for eating disorders. And in that I'm sure we'll talk about heart healing at some point in here. I did heart healing sessions and I didn't know what it was at that point. Now I do them regularly, right? Like to work through things from my past. There's so many things that we have as traumas that we don't think of as a trauma. Like a trauma isn't necessarily always just a sexual abuse or a massive car accident. It can be those moments of, I felt like I felt
mindset.
Yeah. And it's like the things of like those times that I did feel alone when I'm standing there and there's 3 adults around me getting after me and you feel alone, like you have no support. Like those are trauma moments.
Yeah.
And so they were taking me through sessions in counseling. We were working through like really tangible things too for eating disorders and things like that. But I realized a lot of that was coming from, I don't know my purpose. I don't know what I want. I don't know who I am. And so going through those healing sessions that we did in there where I connected with God, Jesus, and Holy Spirit, and had Jesus go, no, I love this piece of you. This is who you are. I made you like this. This is okay. I actually want you to be more like this, the way that they're telling you not to be. That was massive.
Yeah. Yeah. And, trauma, the definition of trauma, or one of them, is anything you went through feeling alone without any help.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, you were surrounded by people, but you felt alone.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you don't have to actually physically be alone
Right.
for you to feel alone,
Yeah.
So I could totally see how that started, started that trauma, started that belief, like you said,
Mhm.
a belief, because you're trying to make sense in the moment of what just happened. And so a belief is formed because that's one of the ways to handle it and make sense of why I was alone or felt like I was alone.
Right.
So, yeah.
Is there anything else?
I think that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your story.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Actually, no, there is something.
Just
I'm like,
kidding.
wait a
Just kidding.
minute.
I'll thank you again in a minute. Take it back.
No, I mean, I want to encourage the parents, or if you're a teenager here, like, first of all, if you're a teenager that's listening to this, thanks for listening to us, grown adults. No, but like, if you're a teenager listening, know that like, there are these adults that are talking to you that some of them, like, don't say this to them, but like, feel sorry for some of them. They've been they've been stuck in this place
Mhm.
where they have felt in bondage to these rules and these standards, and they aren't, that they don't know who they are.
Yeah.
And so you have the ability to be like, okay, thank you for telling me that, Miss Marcia.
Yeah.
I'll think about that. And then going, wow, that sucks. It's like on your own, like, wow, that sucks that that's where she's at. I'm trying to find who I am, and it's okay. And if you're like a parent who's listening, like, let your kids discover those things and stand up for them. Because like those, even that moment, like the moments that I could think back where my mom did come in and step up for me. Like, I went to private Christian school for a year too. And again, it was like constantly the wardrobe thing. No matter how hard I tried, it was like, your body's inappropriate is basically what I was told. Right.
Wow.
And the times that my mom came in and was like, yo, nope, not a thing. Like, she's done nothing wrong. Like, I don't feel like I have a trauma connected to that.
Yeah. Because you were seen in that moment. You weren't alone.
Yeah. And I was stood up for. And then when the assistant pastor was like, no, you're still going on the mission trip. Right. Like, I was stood up for in that moment. And so there isn't like a pain carried behind that.
Wow.
And so stand up for your teenagers and things, even if you need to stand up for them.
Yeah.
And then come back at, like, we've got this environment where people are like, stop stepping in for your kids. No, freaking step in for your kids. And then come back later and be like, maybe I shouldn't have stood up for you because maybe you were in the wrong, like if they were, but stand up for them first, because like your job is them, not like this random person.
Right.
Like, so stand up for them and let them feel seen and heard, and help them in finding their identity, not telling who they are, but like, who do you want to be? What do you want your life to look like?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, dive into those things and those pieces. Because you're going to change their life and save them a lot of years of struggle by doing that. And like, as parents, that should be what you want.
Yeah, for real. Yeah.
That's so good.
You can thank me now.
Thank you so much. No, thank you for sharing your story. I learned stuff I didn't know about you.
Yeah, for real.
Yet again.
Like, guys, we're enjoying this as much as you are.
I was gonna say, we're learning in this too. But you guys, thank you so much for joining us. If you are enjoying the podcast, make sure you subscribe. You can find us on YouTube if you like watching it. You can listen on Spotify or your favorite podcast platforms. Also find us on socials as the Butter Churn Girls,
for sure.
And see all of our behind the scenes shenanigans that we get up to before we hit record. Well, before we actually start our episode. But anyway, you guys have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.